Before the break, we looked at growing divisions within the Republican Party on IVF. And while there is a Christian conservative-led movement against it, Donald Trump says that he strongly supports it, even declaring his party the, quote, leader on IVF. I'm joined now by Amanda Tyler, Executive Director of the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. So, as I mentioned, at the Southern Baptist Convention back in June, you had thousands of delegates ultimately voting to oppose IVF. But what does the movement against IVF look like beyond that contingent?
Well, I think that vote signifies the rightward movement of the Southern Baptist Convention, which has become increasingly anti-woman and frankly anti-Baptist. They have taken really a newly found theological fascination with this idea that life begins at conception and taken it to adopt this really widely unpopular opposition to IVF treatments. There were a number of delegates at that convention themselves who gave very personal and painful testimonies about how IVF had been so important to their families. But nevertheless, the convention did pass that resolution. And I think it's very telling that just today, in my hometown paper of the Dallas Morning News, there was an opinion piece by a pastor of a very conservative Southern Baptist megachurch who wrote about his own experience with IVF, disagreeing with this policy. So it's important to note that this is a really extreme minority point of view that is out of step with most Americans and indeed most Christians. It is also an example of not just a curtailing of reproductive freedom, but also religious freedom, as it seeks to take one theological view on when life begins and impose it on everyone else. This idea that life begins at conception is not something that's representative of either medical or scientific fact, and it's not a view shared by people of all religions or even all Christians. And so it's a really concerning sign of this growing Christian nationalist movement towards authoritarian theocracy.
Why, for those of us who may not be following this as closely from a theological point of view, why are we seeing this now? Why are we seeing Christian conservatives attack this procedure specifically that has historically enjoyed overwhelming bipartisan support across religious divides? Why suddenly has it now emerged once again at the forefront of the religious discourse?
Well, I think in a post-Roe world, after the Dobbs decision a couple of years ago, we've seen anti-abortion activists move to a total ban on abortions and embracing this ideology of fetal personhood that's reflected not just in these concerns about IVF treatments, but also criminalizing abortions and restricting access to birth control. It is about seizing political power. It is less about a given theological point of view, again, which is not shared by people of all religions or even all Christians. For example, Jewish scholars often hold the belief that life begins when breath is first drawn. And many Christians do not hold the view that life begins at conception. And even those who do don't hold the view that that view should be imposed on everyone else. We have separation of church and state in this country. We have this idea that we should not have religious coercion, including religious laws. And I think a huge wake-up call for me and for so many other people was that decision from the Alabama Supreme Court in February, where the Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, in his concurring opinion, used the Bible and theologians as legal support, clearly trying to impose Christianity and Christian doctrine as the law of the land for the people of Alabama. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is not the chief theologian of the people of Alabama, and we saw swift outcry about that decision and pushback from people of all faiths, including Christians.
You bring up such an important point with the reference to the Alabama Supreme Court ruling, because it leads me to ask about whether or not those types of decisions, this broader effort to basically perhaps to ban IVF, Will it reach the level of the abortion debate in this country? Will it become a factor in the way people vote and the ability to organize and mobilize around this issue?
Well, I think these IVF rulings and also these statements from places like the Southern Baptist Convention show that there are a lot of unexpected and unintended consequences in a post-Roe world. We see really majorities of Americans who are deeply concerned about women's health, about abortion bans without exceptions, about the status of reproductive freedom in this country. And so I think we are correct to be alert to these other incursions that people who are really driving this anti-abortion movement would make on women's health, on reproductive freedom, and also on religious freedom. This fetal personhood movement has only just begun, and I think we can see from the reporting and the tactics that they're using that they know that this is deeply unpopular. They know that this is undemocratic, and that majorities of Americans would reject these ideas. And so they are using other tactics, including through the courts, to try to impose their theological view on everyone else to the detriment of everyone's health and safety.
Amanda Tyler, I certainly appreciate you joining us this evening and sharing your insights with us. A very important conversation, one that we should be all concerned about as we head towards the election. Another reminder of what's at stake come November. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.